So, I live in this eco-village in Pyeongchang, Gangwon-do, and a lot of cancer patients come to my clay house. This was about 3 years ago. A sister who was battling cancer came to visit in May, and she looked completely exhausted. Her husband said she only had 3 months to live because the cancer had spread to her liver. They came because she liked the clay house and wanted to ask the priest for some help to live a bit longer. I suggested she attend my happiness lectures. At that time, there were about 10 other cancer patients there. Everyone else was laughing during the lecture, but she wasn't smiling at all. I figured it was because she was worried since she only had 3 months left. She sat there with a blank expression for the whole 2 hours, so after the lecture, I called her over to talk. I asked her what was bothering her so much. Hey sister, are you worried? You're stressing about dying in 3 months. But who knows if it'll be 3 months or 3 years? The truth is, a lot of people die in traffic accidents or drown every day. We should just enjoy today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Remember in Matthew chapter 6, it says not to worry about what to eat, drink, or wear. Even the birds are taken care of by God. We might not be dressed as nicely as the flowers, but we need to focus on today. Whatever we need to deal with today is enough. Tomorrow will handle its own problems. So don't stress about tomorrow. I got a bit harsh with you earlier, and then you didn't come out of the house for 2 days. I thought you'd come to me for comfort after I scolded you, but after those 2 days, you said, Father, thinking about it, I realized that in these last 3 months, I should just be grateful for the blessings God has given me over the past 50 years. So, she changed her mind. Amen. She started laughing, really laughing, during the lecture and while walking around with her fellow patients. It was great to see her smile, even though her face was darkened from the treatment. Then in June, she came here for chemotherapy. She had been fighting cancer for almost 5 years. She was supposed to come back in 10 days, but she returned after just 6. When I asked why, she said that during her 5 years of chemotherapy, she always threw up and cried because it hurt so much. But this time, after her treatment, she didn't throw up at all. She felt really good. So, 6 days later, she was thanking God, saying, Thank you, God, for not letting me be in pain. Thank you for not making me throw up. Then she came back to Pyeongchang, and after that, she settled into life at my place. When the younger folks come over, I didn't even ask, but this sister keeps bringing people around, saying we should be grateful and praise her. She's doing her own thing. But come July, about 4,000 kids come to our place for environmental education. So, cancer patients usually get sent home. This is Justin Suncheon, Gila-do, and she says she won't go back after the break, asking where she should go since she lives here. I told her to just go and come back. And this sister sent all the cancer patients home. By August, there were a lot of lectures backed up, and I couldn't keep track of everything. I totally forgot about it. Now it's October, and a brother called me. He's a priest, and he said, Father, it's Peter. By that time, the worldly wife had already passed away, and they had the funeral and the 49th day ritual. I think a lot of people who came to my house have already passed away. All the funerals are done, and I don't know where they're buried. So, Father, now what? So, they asked me to pray, and then I was like, so, what's going on with you, sister? Where have you been looking for answers? And the brother said, well, my wife went to Seoul a few days ago for radiation treatment, and they checked her cancer cells. Guess what, Father? All the cancer cells are gone. It really depends on how you approach it. Of course, if God calls someone, there's nothing we can do about it, and honestly, I don't think it's a bad thing if God calls them home. I mean, how great would that be? Recently, a doctor in the U.S. studied people who died and came back to life, and the stories are pretty similar. When people die, they talk about going through a tunnel towards the light, and suddenly they can see the whole world, moving towards a bright place. I've seen so many people during the sacrament of the sick who pass away so peacefully. So, really, living is good, but death can be too. Even if it's a bit of a hassle, it's all good. People who worry like that don't really believe, right? Anyway, it's better to be alive for now, isn't it? Don't worry about dying, you won't die until it's your time. So until then, just chill. By the way, I went for a walk. Oh, and now it's November, and my house has been getting a lot of visitors. I'm taking some retirees out for eel dinner. I was driving them in my car when I got a call in the evening. It was from a young woman, a priestess who's 84 years old, and I was driving with another priestess who's 63. I got a call from an unknown number, and this super cute, young woman says, "Father, it's me." I had no idea who she was. Her voice was so sweet. So I asked, "Who is this?" And she replied, "Father, you're hurting my feelings." "You've already forgotten my voice?" I was like, "Who are you?" And she said, "It's me, from Maria Nursing Home." She was just so cute. So, the other day, I was talking to this sister who used to cry and say, "Father, I can't die." But now she sounds so cheerful. She told me how her health has been improving and she's just so happy lately. Back in May of last year, I went to give a talk in Yosu, Jeollanam-do, at a place called Munsu-dong Parish, and this sister came all the way from Suncheon. She called me up and said, "Father, I'm so happy." I asked her what was making her so happy, and she said she finally got a perm. It's like a dream come true for her. When I saw her, she looked really pretty. You know, one thing about people who get cancer is that they often look beautiful. It's like they feel they have to put on a pretty face, so even when they're going through tough times, they keep it together. That's why you often see beautiful people dealing with these kinds of struggles. And some folks who live without much care also end up facing these issues. They hold everything in, and that can lead to cancer. Anyway, among all the people there, Maria really stood out to me. Our staff didn't even recognize her at first because she looked so different. It turned pink and pulled me in, making me so happy. So this sister just hugged me tight, and I could really feel the Holy Spirit filling me up. Amen. But you know, that person who said they'd pass away in 3 months is still alive after 3 years now. So folks, let's not worry and fret. If we live with gratitude, good things will keep happening to us. Amen. Father, you should try being married sometime. You'll see how much it can get on your nerves. Who do you usually get mad at? Your spouse or the kids? Right? You look at the kids, and even if they haven't done anything wrong, when you're angry, you just let it all out on them. You think, "I don't need you or you're not worth it." You even say things like, "How can I even eat?" to them. But if you raise your kids with anger, that anger will come back to bite you. About 15 years ago, my younger priest friend decided to buy a record player at Yongsan Electronics Market. So, I went with him to get it. It was around February 15th, and that day, I think his son had just graduated from middle school. They were going to buy him a computer. It looks like this happened. The mom came out with 1,000,000 won. And the son kept insisting he wanted to buy a 1.5 million won computer instead of 1,000,000 won. So, the mom started getting really frustrated. If he just bought the million won, it would have been fine, but he kept arguing for the more expensive one. She got so mad that she lost her cool and smacked him on the back of the head right there in front of a bunch of people. It made a loud sound, and I thought it was some kind of music playing until I realized what happened. I was so intrigued by what was going on that I stopped looking at the stereo and started watching them instead. The mom was so angry that she lost her temper and said, "From now on, don't call me mom, call me auntie. If you're not going to listen to me, then call me that. I'm not your mom anymore." The kid, after getting smacked in front of everyone, was so embarrassed that he started crying. He was really upset, and after a while, I think he realized he did something wrong and thought about it. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know that you were really upset over the million one thing. But honestly, it feels like you've completely lost it. Most moms would probably just be grateful that I changed my mind, and I should apologize for hitting you. But you just keep calling me names and acting like I've done something terrible." That kid got a computer that day, sure, but as time goes on, do you think they'll remember that you bought it for them? Or will they just remember getting hit? 5 or 10 years down the road, it's the hitting they'll remember, not the computer. Parents are funny like that. They forget all about the times they've hit their kids and only think about the good stuff they did. So, the kids remember the beatings, and the parents only remember the nice things. When they meet later, it's like they're living in totally different worlds. If any of you think that when your kids get older, they'll just remember how well you treated them after you've hit them, think again. Just the other day, there was a story about a mom in China. You saw that thing on TV where a kid was getting kicked and hit on the street, right? If that kid grows up in that kind of environment, he's definitely going to pay his mom back with anger later on. But the reason we get so mad at our kids is really simple. It's because they're not doing well in school. They're not studying and just goofing off, playing video games instead. And when they get all wide-eyed and confrontational with their parents, it's infuriating, isn't it? Then they slam their door and lock themselves in their room, which just makes you boil inside. But you know, it's totally normal for teenagers to act that way. They have the right to be a little lost during that time. It's just part of being a teenager. They're going through confusion and change, and it's natural. But moms often don't allow that. They're feeling scattered, their bodies are changing, their minds are all over the place, and they get all excited when they see a girl. They don't even want to go to school sometimes. So they think, maybe I'll skip school today and just go hang out in Myeongdong for a bit to sort things out. I didn't go to school for a day, and the teacher told my mom that I wasn't there. When she checked, I was just hanging out in Myeongdong. My mom was freaking out. She was like, you need to study instead of wandering around. I'll handle Myeongdong for you. But right now, you have to focus on your studies. Kids in our country often see their parents as the bad guys, like demons that are just there to make their lives miserable. But honestly, if parents could just let go of their expectations, there wouldn't be any fights with their kids. Kids need to figure things out for themselves quickly. This reminds me of a story from about 3 years ago when Joseph came over. He had just graduated high school but didn't get into college. He was just stuck at home playing computer games all day. His mom was losing her mind seeing him not getting into college and staying up all night gaming, only waking up at 1 p.m. It was driving her crazy, so she brought him to me in Pyeongchang, and he had gained so much weight. My kid's putting on weight, and now you can't even see his eyelids. The priest says my kid's a problem because he doesn't study and only plays computer games. But when I looked closely at his eyes, there wasn't really a problem. The thing is, I don't even know how much weight he's gained. Like, is he 100, 110, 120, or 130 kilograms? Our village scale only measures up to 100 kilograms, and it just spins around when you step on it. I had him weigh himself during break, and he said he was about 130 kilograms. So I told him to just chill for now. His mom left, and he's actually a healthy kid with a clear mind. From a parent's perspective, it's a concern, but I don't see it as a problem. I told him to go work in the fields, and after a week, I asked the manager how he was doing. The manager said, so, basically, it's about how my mom brought this kid, who's supposed to be number one in our eco village. He's great at his job and has an awesome personality. The kid's really strong and doesn't slack off. You know, he believes in living life through his body rather than his head. I mean, if you had to choose, would you want to live life using your brain or your body? It seems like he's all about the physical stuff. Anyway, he's really impressive, and in June, there's a river flowing right in front of our eco village where they do rafting. So, they were talking about getting a rafting guide certification. But the team leader said, Father, all the other kids can get it, but he can't. Why? Because the certification is usually for sports students who have to flip the boat, jump into the river, and deal with all sorts of water challenges. If a kid falls into a 130 kilometers river, that's it. How can they get certified? But we're still working with the association folks on this. I know it pretty well, so just do something about it, okay? So I sent the guide certificate, and I got it back on Friday. Can you believe it? How did I manage that? Well, it didn't rain that week, so the boat could just go in and out easily. I got the certificate, and the kid's so popular as a guide who's really good at it. So when his mom came in September, she saw that he had dropped from 130 kilograms to 116 kilograms. He looked so much healthier and his eyes were sparkling. So she said, let's get you studying. Honestly, if this kid worked at my place for 4 years, he could make 50 to 70 million won. Because we pay well, then he could save that up to start a business, you know? It's not like he has to rely solely on studying. So, father, is my kid going to live off his body or his brains? In the class, the ones who aren't doing well are all physical types, right? Just look at your kids, the ones who don't stand out in class. Kids in Germany are all about hands-on learning. When they finish elementary school and move up to middle school, they get sorted out. They're told either to go to college or to learn a trade, and even if teachers separate them, no parent questions why their kid isn't doing well. The German parents just want their kids to thrive by using their hands and skills. They support that kind of life for their kids. But if we tried to do something similar here, I once talked to some principals and vice principals at a training center. And they said if we made those kinds of decisions, we'd get a ton of backlash from parents. Parents here have way too many expectations for their kids, and as a result, the kids end up sacrificing their own paths. In Germany, only about 25% of kids graduate from college. Not many even go to college. In the US, especially in wealthy areas like New York, the college graduation rate is around 60%. But here, it's a whole different story with college. What's the admission rate? It's 92%. Anyone can get into college these days. In Germany, about 75 to 80% are the ones who actually work with their hands. In the US, it's around 40 to 50%. In our country, it's 92%, while in the US and Canada, only about 60% who get into college actually graduate. A lot of them don't graduate. So over there, they don't really ask about graduation rates, it's just known that it's tough. But here, if you get into college, almost everyone graduates, 92% do. We only have about 88% who work with their hands, while 92% are more academic. Are there people working in factories or farms? Not really. So out of that 92%, only about 40 to 50% actually find jobs. The rest are just kind of floundering. When you see those kids, it's infuriating, isn't it? But who's to blame? It's the parents. They should have realized early on that their kid might not do well in academics and guided them towards something more practical, like farming. If we taught kids the right skills, they would already have jobs. But because of our twisted desires, we end up messing up the kids and the parents too. We're so caught up in trying to make money that we can't even plan for our retirement. So, everyone is just living in this constant state of anger. I really believe that the education system in our country is the root of this problem. It makes us angry about our kids. If a couple gets along well, that's great, but often moms are so obsessed with their kids that they ignore their husbands. They don't even notice if their husbands are feeling lonely or struggling. Kids who see their parents loving each other and getting along grow up feeling secure. I remember in high school, a friend told me he wanted to drink because his dad hit his mom and left her with black eyes. He was really struggling with that. I was shocked because I couldn't understand how couples could fight like that. I had never seen my parents argue. Not long ago, when all my siblings gathered together, I mentioned that I had never seen our parents fight. My siblings immediately chimed in, saying, "Well, you should have been around when the priest was living with us." But honestly, I've never witnessed it. I tend to stay pretty positive about things. But you know, guys in our country have it rough. They work their butts off to earn money, but they can't really enjoy it. Right? By the time you're paying for your kids' tuition and college fees, it feels like you're living like a slave until you're in your 60s, just to get married in your 30s. Doesn't that make guys frustrated? Of course it does. Have you ever thought about how those husbands feel? Seriously, do you treat your husbands like kings? I mean, do you ever see a random guy on the street giving you money just because he thinks you're pretty? Sure, that happens. But your husband is out there working his fingers to the bone every month, bringing home $2,000 to $4,000. It's a lot to handle. You should be grateful to that husband, right? But instead of just saying thanks, it seems like they can't even appreciate someone else's kimchi stew. It's tough to see your kids if you're working late at night. Sometimes you don't even catch a glimpse of them until midnight. Sure, fathers are raising their kids, but it's hard to get close to them. And during their teenage years, do they really act sweet towards their dads? They rebel and push back. This leaves men feeling lost. That's why men in their 40s have the highest suicide rates in the world. It's 3 times higher than for women in our country. These guys have nowhere to turn, and it gets lonely. Women are in a similar boat. I feel for them too. This all comes down to education. When the kids are going through their rebellious teenage phase, you might be around 45 or 50. So, while your kids are hitting puberty, you're facing menopause. That's a time when you really need care and support. It's a tough age for everyone. Is your skin sagging or not? How about your eyelids? Are they drooping? What about around your eyes? And your cheeks? Are they sagging too? When you look in the mirror, you realize how your face changes. To look pretty, your eyes need to be lifted, and the same goes for your cheeks. But when you hit 50, it feels like there's nothing pretty left. Young women try to look nice by drawing their eyeliner all the way up, but once you hit 50, even if you draw it on, it just ends up drooping anyway. In our country, women going through menopause often hide their pain and struggles and sacrifice themselves for their kids. They bury their feelings. You know how you can be in the middle of a menopause episode and suddenly forget where you put your wallet? That happens a lot. So, when they think they're the only ones sacrificing, it makes them angry. And when you turn 50, you might end up feeling like an empty nester. It's tough, you know? Kids are out there trying to study, and the husband is off making money. When you hit 50, it feels like there's nobody around, and you start sinking into loneliness. Then, when you see your kids, you get all worked up, and the same goes for your husband. You've got all this testosterone pumping, and you just start shouting. Among women over 50, it seems like it's just tough, rough women left. When I see couples at church, it's funny because the women look pretty and really nice, cooking up good meals. I see them having a drink with their husbands and think, wow, I wish I could be like that, living with such a lovely and sweet woman. Most of the time, the guys just say, oh, you're lucky, I'm so envious. And then they tell me, take her home with you. It's like we can't love properly, and we can't build that affection with our kids. So, all this anger just builds up inside us, and it's really overwhelming. Things are happening in our society where people are just killing each other and throwing things away. When that makes you angry, how do you control that anger? How do you deal with it? Let's talk about that. When you're mad, just look to Jesus. When life gets frustrating, just look to Jesus. There's a story in John chapter 8 about a woman caught in adultery. It happened 2,000 years ago, and back then in the Middle East, they would stone such a woman to death. Recently, we've seen similar events in the Middle East, where they literally made a heap of stones to bury someone. This woman, who was caught in adultery, was out with a man and got punished for it. But she was caught in the act. Women often get judged harshly in these situations. I'm not dealing with this, but this woman did. So I think the guys are going to be really mad, like, really mad. This woman must have been pretty, right? Getting involved like that means she was risking her life. I wonder how this woman felt. It must have been wild. It's like the guys couldn't handle it. A pretty woman gets caught with a guy, and of course, the men are going to freak out. Their eyes are probably going to pop out. And Jesus? Well, he knew what was up. In John chapter 7, they were always looking for a chance to kill him, but this incident happens in chapter 8. So Jesus is all about forgiveness and love, but he also knows the law can't just be ignored. The law experts bring this woman to Jesus and ask him what to do since she was caught. But when Jesus sees how worked up the guys are, like their eyes are wild, almost all white with just a little bit of black, he knows it's intense. If you're wise, you wouldn't jump into a conversation between two people who are fighting. Picture this: two people are really at it, and then I step in to break it up. But once I get in there and see everyone's all riled up, it turns into a bigger fight, like three people going at it. When people are that worked up, even the best advice just goes in one ear and out the other. Jesus saw that these folks were completely fired up, so he didn't even engage with them. Instead, he just wrote something on the ground. That's a really smart move, waiting until everyone calms down before saying anything. I have a wish. I've been a parish priest for 10 years, and luckily, I've never had a situation where the parishioners were divided and fighting. But next time I get assigned to a parish, I want to ask the bishop for a favor. I'd love to be sent to a church where the congregation is split into two groups and going at it like crazy. I really need to talk to you about something, so please send me over. There's something I really want to do. You see, I just got assigned to a spot where I'm going to be fighting like crazy. Once I get there, both chairpersons will show up, right? The priest will be like, "Hey, you guys took all the money from our church." And then the other chairperson will say, "You ruined the vibe at our church." It's so frustrating that I just want to write something on the floor of the rectory and get it out of my system. I really want to do that. And if your husband comes in all worked up, wanting to talk, and he's like, "Why are you treating my mom so badly?" and it turns into a fight, you know. He bursts in, and when you see his eyes 95% white and only 5% black, you know he's really heated. Then the wife might say, "I have a lot to say too, let's go." What do you think will happen? It's gonna end up in a loud argument, for sure. Because when it comes to talking, men can't win against women. Women talk about 2,000 words a day while men only manage about 1,500. So in a verbal fight, women are at a serious advantage. I can't win. I've never seen a priest beat a nun in a fight. It's just not gonna happen. So, when your husband gets all worked up, just don't say anything. Write something down on the floor or do whatever until he calms down. Jesus was basically doing the same thing, waiting for the excitement to settle. He learned a lot about this kind of stuff in school, right? He was just waiting for the tension to ease. Once things calmed down, the situation was still there, but the emotions were lower. Even if you're really angry, if you take a breath, you can usually chill out a bit. So once the excitement was under control, people asked Jesus what to do about this woman who committed adultery. And Jesus could see that the tension had settled, so he said something like, "Let the one without sin throw the first stone at me." After that, he does something amazing. He writes something on the ground. What he's doing is giving people time to think. Imagine you've just scolded your kid, and while you're at it, your son is just sitting there playing a game or watching TV. How do you think he's going to take that? It just makes things worse. Giving them time to reflect is crucial. Jesus gives that time to think. He says, "Let the one without sin throw the first stone," and then he goes back to writing on the ground. He waits until everyone leaves. He doesn't even look up. Once everyone's gone, he finally lifts his head and asks the woman, "Where are your accusers?" She replies, "They're gone, Lord." And then Jesus says, "If they haven't condemned you, neither do I." This is such a powerful story because Jesus has the authority to judge, but he chooses not to. You can discipline that woman, but since no one else is asking, I won't either. Isn't it crazy? Jesus forgives three people: first, the Pharisees who want to kill; second, the woman caught in adultery; and third, even the ones who say he didn't come to abolish the law. In other words, once you calm down, the problems can be solved. If you try to solve things while you're worked up, it's not going to work. So, how do we control this anger? First, breathe properly. If you read any book on managing anger, the first thing they'll tell you is to breathe. When you're angry, your breathing gets shallow, right? You're holding your breath and huffing and puffing. That's because you're not breathing right. But remember, in Genesis, God breathed life into humans. So, when we breathe, we're breathing life. If we don't breathe properly, we're mishandling that life. It's the same thing, but how does the breath come into my body? It comes in through my nose, goes to my heart, moves up. Then down through my lower abdomen, goes to my liver, and then to my lungs before it finally goes back out. That's how breathing works. So, all the organs need to get enough oxygen. But when you get angry, where do you hold your breath? Right in your throat, like you're choking yourself, especially when you're fighting with your husband. You might say, "What have I done for you since we got married? I took you out to eat, did the dishes, even took you on trips and bought you a mink coat and diamonds." And then your face gets all red, right? Why does it turn red? Because the breath is supposed to flow down. But it's stuck up here, so it just keeps building up like a balloon. If you yell and fight for an hour, guess what? That oxygen isn't getting through, and if it doesn't, you can end up with what's called anger sickness. So, when you're fighting, you need to breathe while you do it. You should be saying, "Honey, what have you done for me?" What's there to say? I did the dishes, but did you take me out to eat? I did the chores, but did you buy me a mink coat or some diamonds? What have you really done for me? I just came to your family and worked hard. I believed in God so much, and what did I get? I got sent to Nazareth in Galilee. I worked like a servant at home, and you think you can yell at me? If you breathe and fight like this, you won't get slapped by your husband. He'll talk calmly to you. But if you get all worked up, emotions take over, and reason goes out the window. So when I get really angry, I just take 10 deep breaths, and it helps solve the problem. So when you're angry, just breathe. And if you're still mad, go for a walk. Walking is super important. If you take a rosary and walk around the neighborhood, it helps clear your mind, and solutions just come to you. After 2 or 3 hours of walking, you'll feel completely calm when you go back home. When you get angry, you really need to just walk away. Staying put only makes things worse. That's why the Camino de Santiago, which is an 800 kilometers trek to the tomb of St. James in Spain, is so popular worldwide. It's not just about the exercise. Walking helps heal people and clear their minds. So, if you're really angry, just go for a walk. And if you've got a big challenge in your life, consider doing a pilgrimage on foot. Our church group did a walk from Saint-Omptio to Termi, gathering about 400 to 500 people every night at 8 p.m. and walking until 3 or 4 a.m. We walked for 4 days straight, and people came back with incredible stories of how they felt blessed. Those with back pain found relief. Those with stomach issues healed, and people with chaotic minds found peace. Don't stress out over things you can't control. Seeing the light and moving forward is really important in life. There's a lot to think about, like when we remember our late grandmother. Back then, she was young, but life goes on. If you keep that in mind while you walk, you'll feel grateful. Amen. So when you're angry, take a deep breath and then go for a walk. Another way to manage your anger is to eat well. A lot of times, what we eat can make us feel angry, especially junk food. If you eat the wrong stuff, it can have a negative effect. Eating too much meat can also make you irritable. Think about it. Does a deer get angry? Nope. How about a lion? Nope. What do lions eat? Meat. What do deer eat? Grass. If my kid is acting out, throwing the remote and smashing doors, it's not just because he's got a bad attitude. It might be because I've been feeding him too much meat. So, what should I feed him instead? Try feeding them grass for 6 months. After 6 months, they'll be completely calm. And you know, a lot of the food we eat has a lot of anger in it. Let me give you a simple example. Eggs. Think about how chickens lay eggs. The chickens we usually eat are all cooped up, right? They don't get to roam around. They live in cramped spaces and get stressed out. So, what happens? They end up cutting off the beaks of those chickens. The eggs laid by those stressed out chickens? Yeah, you guessed it, are filled with that negative energy. The problem is that we're eating unnatural, semi-natural foods. I raise about 300 chickens, and the eggs from the ones that roam freely taste amazing. When you crack one open, it's rich and delicious. But the store-bought eggs often have a weird smell because those chickens are stressed. This shows how important what we eat really is. That's why natural food matters so much to us. And by the way, coffee has a lot of that negative energy too. When I eat, my heart starts racing. If something frustrating happens on top of that, I just explode. So, eating is really important. Fourth, if we want to manage our anger well, we need to learn to enjoy life a bit. Remember, God worked for 6 days and rested on the seventh. So, you all need to work and then take breaks, right? It's important to take breaks. But we often forget to relax. God made the sun round, the moon round, mountains round, and even our heads round for a reason to live in a balanced way. But in Pyeongchang, when I'm driving around the eco-village, I never hear honking. Yet, as soon as I hit Seoul, it's all honking and chaos. If someone is just a second late to start, the horns go wild. So, you really need to find that balance in life, whether it's between men and women or taking breaks. That's super important. So, if you can, come visit places like our eco village for a week each year.